All right. Um, okay, everybody, welcome. We are going to get started in just 30 seconds. Put my favorite music on. Actually, that didn't work. So, all right. 15 seconds to go. We'll get moving. And all right, everyone. Welcome to the Get Global live stream. My name is Link Brown. I am originally from the US. Now have been in Europe for 7 years, been in for 5 years, based outside of Geneva, Switzerland. And I help Swiss small and mid-sized businesses drive their commercial growth in America. Francesca?
Yeah, thank you very much. And hi, everyone. Thank you, Link, for having me for this series today. My name is Francisca. I am founder of Mercerex, where I provide leadership and sales coaching. And obviously, I'm Swiss. And I'm really excited to be here today and to talk with you, Link, about cultural differences between the two countries. And I'm looking forward for this series.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. So, we originally thought about this whole concept because really cultural differences, though they might not seem that big between Switzerland and the U.S., even the small differences are what create big problems when it comes to doing business in the U.S. So we have an 8-part series where we're going to go through different words that are synonymous with Swiss culture, how they're understood there. And then we're going to look at how they're understood in American context. And lastly, we'll talk about how do we close the gap? How do we bridge that gap between the two cultures? So the first topic that we're going to talk about this week is going to be reliability. Okay, so we thought that was the best place to start. And so, all right, so Francesca, tell us a little bit about what reliability means, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great. So reliability for me, I would say I would associate reliability with punctuality, quality, maybe safety, even public service, or of course personal reliability. But for this series today, I thought we're gonna choose 4 topics that are very close to it. And for me, it's really this punctuality, it's the commitment, business trust, and consistency. Maybe let me go into the punctuality, which is a very obvious word for Swiss person. So what does it mean showing up on time for us in Switzerland? So showing up on time actually means showing up early. So if I gonna meet you online, Link, I gonna be there 2 minutes early so we can start at the agreed time. Or if I would go and meet you in Basel or in Geneva, I would be there at least 10-15 minutes earlier, just depending a little bit on the logistics, to see that we can start to the agreed time. And I think this mainly leads back to respecting each other's time, and we are aware that the other person has some commitments as well. So therefore, we are really careful in being very, very precise and very punctual. How is this in the US? Are you also on time?
Well, okay, again, depends on what you mean by on time. So on time, I would say, okay, so being late, more than a few minutes late is considered very disrespectful, right? But on time doesn't necessarily mean early. It really actually depends. There's a lot of people, some people show up early. Everyone mainly shows up at the time. So if we set 10 o'clock, everyone is in the room at 10 o'clock, but it doesn't mean they're necessarily ready to go and ready to start at 10 o'clock. So it doesn't always mean early. It just depends on the person. And I think this kind of stems from like this idea of like there's a lot of grace given or a lot of understanding given from this, that things don't always go as planned. And so people are a little bit like they always give like this I'll just say understanding for people
Yeah.
who don't do things exactly the way. But I like this idea that you talked about of respect and like other people's times, and I've definitely seen it here that there are standards that you're not even allowed to that you must uphold in the culture, and punctuality is one of them. I know another area that we were going to talk about was this whole idea of commitment. So what does that mean? What does commitment mean in Swiss context?
So for me, commitment means also if I tell you something that I would do something, I'm actually going to do it. So yes means yes. And that not obviously in very big topics that everybody would suggest that it is the way. But for us, it's like even in a small topic. So let's move to kind of something private. If I'm gonna say, Lynn, by the way, I have this book if you're interested, and you say, yes, I'm really interested in it, I'm gonna bring you that book, but I also expect that you bring it back to me. So once you read it, of course.
Right.
So that commitment and that doing something that you said, it can be in work also. Let me do. I will do that for you. Then we expect that it is done. Otherwise, you don't say yes. And I think this goes a little bit back to respecting a lot verbal agreements. We learn early on that they are actually legally binding. So that's really strong. So and we value that very high. Yeah. And we see that as reliable. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting because so I've had Swiss friends like loan me books or loan me something. It's not only that they expect me to give it back, but they actually expect me to have read it as well. That if I accepted it, that I actually did something with it. There's no way I'm coming back with the idea, I forgot to read it or I didn't have time. No, it's like they took the time to give it. They also want me to take the time to read it or to understand as well. It's interesting because I would say I like the phrase you said, yes means yes. And in the US context, I think it means yes means it depends, right? So generally, it's important to keep your commitments. But I kind of look at it, it's two sides. I don't necessarily see it as all bad. I kind of see the good part of it can be this. In America, we're always interested in doing things better, in making sure that the essence of what needs to be done is done. But if we can be done more efficiently or it can be done better in some sort of way, like we're willing to do that and we want to do that. Where that comes into problems, and I've seen this a lot with Swiss clients as well, is where we start to talk about things like when yes means it depends, but you don't know what the effect is on the other person. And this becomes like you get into legal issues where people don't understand that the way if you change something, it actually changes the way that it affected someone else. So sometimes us changing or being willing to change or innovate is good. But sometimes it can cause problems. And I know a lot of my Swiss clients are always concerned about the litigious or the legal issues or legal environment that there is in the US. And I think that can become a problem sometimes. Because yes doesn't always mean yes. Sometimes it just means it depends. And it's not always, like I said, it's not always a negative thing. But this actually is interesting because it gets us to this whole idea of trust and business trust. Where do you see this in Swiss context?
Yeah, in a Swiss context, and especially under this whole umbrella of reliability, and I think punctuality and the commitment also lead nicely into that. Business trust is, of course, very important. And actually, it's done a lot on just talking with each other. So let's go into, for example, contracting. If
Mhm.
I am negotiating with a business partner, I actually, once I get a contract, do not really expect that there are surprises. So I really expect, once the contract is here, I can just sign what we agreed, and it's just the paperwork, like you said, the paperwork. And I would say it leads into, especially in the smaller SMEs, into areas that you do not even sign something, or you sign it a lot later just for the paperwork, and you start already working because you value that trust highly. Now, of
Mm.
course, when you are in the big corporates, you have processes that would not allow that. But then we claim that is very American. um, but in generally, I think that's really important. And I think also from a personal perspective, I, for example, have even moved or got a key from an apartment without signing the contract. And this business trust is really very high valued.
Yeah, I've actually seen that as well. It's interesting because yeah, I've had people start services before the contract was signed. It was just like this agreement. We talked about it. So they're like, "Hey, I'll start working." Now they also expect to get paid, even if you didn't even if you didn't sign the contract. but
Exactly.
but for sure they will get moving. They will get moving on it, and I think it's really interesting because it is like this intrinsic like thought of that there's trust between us. You're in the society. So hey, I trust you. We talked about it. Hey, I'm going to get moving, and I really I actually appreciate that more about Swiss culture. And I think when we talk about it in American culture, man, I mean, there are some businesses where there's still the handshake deal, but everyone starts to see that more and more there are these legal contracts that just get uh, thicker and thicker, and it's like you have to set aside a certain budget for the lawyers, and you put everything into the contract that could possibly go wrong, or onto the product that could possibly go wrong to keep from exposing yourself to trouble. So it's very important. Obviously, it can be handled because it happens. Business still takes place in the U.S., but I think it's definitely something to be conscious of, that you really need to think through. Um, really need to think through business issues before you go in. One thing in our other talks that you had mentioned is this whole idea of that there are people like how should I put it? Uh, that again, just the handshake deal being something that is extremely important. So there was something else I wanted to say, but I completely forgot it. Anyway, so by the way, we have some questions, and we'll get to them at the very end. So I really like one of these
Mhm.
questions. This question that came up. But the last thing that we were going to talk about was this whole idea of consistency. Um,
Yes.
yeah. So tell me about consistency as you see it.
Yeah, consistency, and I think that's again, that's something really very important. It means that things are always done the same way, and
Mm,
then we can rely on them again. So we come back to the
mm,
reliability, which is the topic. However, you just said before something really nicely. You said, yeah, you look into new ways of doing it and to improve. And maybe that's sometimes why in Switzerland things go a little bit slower, because they really trust and rely on what has worked, and they're a bit more
mm,
hesitant to try out new things. Um, so in that aspect, to go into business, it's also like, I expect from my business partner to do things always the same way, that I can rely
mm,
on, to have kind of the same delivery terms and so on. The quality needs to be the same of the product,
mm,
and that leads to that. And I would also, or I think in general in Switzerland, companies prefer to pay a little bit more, but they really can trust on this reliability part and if this consistency, because then it's kind of worth the money, let's say.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I think in the States, we pay for speed,
Mhm.
right? Like even if it's a little bit different each time, we're okay with that as long as we get it done fast and the essence is done. Now, of course, it just goes back to the legal issues that if it's not done in the way that you're expected, like there becomes these times where legal issues start to take place. But one of the ways I look at consistency is I think about it in personal context. Um, so one of the best examples I could give is I have a great group of friends, and my friends, most of them are American, but one of them, he's Swiss. Um, and so when I think about consistency, now he's a person that if I have a barbecue at my house and I say it starts at 2, he's there at 2. He always brings something. I know exactly what he's going to bring. He's so consistent. He's just everything that he says he's going to do. He just does it. If he can't do it, he says, I can't do it. Now, the funny thing is that my best friends who I appreciate just as much from the American side, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll say they'll do something and it doesn't happen. But it's always on the little things. But the reason why they're my best friends is because I know that in the big situations, when when I really need them, they're going to be there and I can rely on that. But so I don't need consistency that every time it's the same. I need to know that when we call it when the chips are on the table, when everything counts, like they're there for me. And so it's just a different perspective, but I think it's really interesting to see, like, I would still call them consistent, even though it's not the same.
Yeah.
Right. So
Great.
in the end, how do we bring this all together? Like, how do we actually help people bridge the gap?
Yeah, for me, what comes to my mind here is really, as a Swiss person, maybe assume a little bit less and ask more. We are also not native English speakers. Generally, we have at least one other language that we normally speak. So Americans are really well outspoken. Sometimes this might be a bit overwhelming. So people should just not be afraid of really asking a lot of questions and follow up to say, like, did I understand you correctly, or repeat. I understand here that we're going to do X, Y, Z. So that the communication gets more clear and more concise, I think, and really not be worried about topics that you might assume.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I think from the American culture, understanding that we kind of see, this is the way I see it. I see like being in Switzerland is really like a throwback to 30 years ago, the way the US was. And some people might call that old fashioned, but I would say that being old fashioned is not a bad thing. Showing up early is not bad. Doing exactly what you said you were going to do is not bad. Having a handshake deal and keeping your word no matter what is not a bad thing. Now, again, it could expose you to different things in an American context, but I think when you're working with another culture, I think it's just important to understand that. And so, like I said, I think almost embracing those old-fashioned values is a good thing. What else do you see? Anything else?
Yeah, I think just kind of recognize each other's differences and communicating through them would be for me a really important part as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny because I think in the end, I think it's all like slow down.
Yeah.
Slow down. In the
Yeah.
US, we have a phrase that says slow down to speed up, right? And
Yes.
it's not like just realize, like, if you really want to go far to get with someone, like, you just slow down, just take the time. Like, forget about assumptions. Someone asked me a question the other day, and I appreciate it. I said about how to overcome cultural bias, and I said, honestly, the better I am at understanding my own cultural bias, the more I can just slow down and then, like, not assume too much when I work with someone else as well.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
So
Yeah.
So by the way, so we have a couple of minutes. I
Mhm.
wanted to add, so someone asked a question. They said, "Do you think the Swiss definition of punctuality will change as we all are experiencing back-to-back Zoom meetings?" What do you say?
Yeah, I would say that could be very stressful, but
Mm.
I don't. Well, that's my assumption now. That I would say this experiencing back-to-back Zoom meetings, that's really stressful sometimes when you are a punctual person. And I think this punctuality applies to most Swiss people.
Mm.
So you're gonna run late or you need to cut off early. That's something we dislike, and it could eventually have an impact on the person. How
Yeah.
the person will work out it, I don't think that a person that is naturally really punctual will enjoy that.
Yeah, it's funny because as you say that, I do meetings, a lot of Zoom meetings with people, when I introduce myself, and I would say surely I like the word you use about stress. I definitely find that people find it to be a little stressful when when we're uh, particularly if they're Swiss, if they're native Swiss, they find it to be a stressful situation when they just come from other meetings. So I just try to take a couple of minutes and slow down and just listen a little bit more, break the ice a little bit more, because I can see like this tension, but I still want to finish at the time that I'm supposed to, so I don't keep that tension going. So yeah, maybe it changes, but maybe just people, everything is like a yin and a yang. I feel like people will also just start scheduling less meetings, right? And that's going to be okay too. So yeah, cool. So anyway, great conversation. So everybody, so stay tuned for in 2 weeks. We're going to have our next part in the series, and the word we're going to explore is quality. And quality is definitely something that I've experienced. It's completely different in Swiss context versus America. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for the questions. Bruce, sorry you feel guilty, probably about being punctual. And just it's really good to have everybody.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Link, and see you in 2 weeks.
Yes. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.